Hello, welcome to Garden Chronicles. My name is James David, and in today's video, I would like to talk about this particular type of famously known plant known as Monstera species. And of course, these are a plant review sold along the Sungai Buloh nurseries in this region. Just a little bit of a introduction on this particular type of Monstera. I'm pretty sure you have come across a lot of information, and there is a debate, and there's a lot of comparison when it comes to Monstera Borsigiana versus with Monstera Deliciosa. And in a way, I can tell you that personally, after checking through and going through a lot of them, I actually can say a lot of information can be confusing simply because both of them really look alike, and in most cases it really take a lot of trained eye and experts to really go through and check and figure out exactly what is going on. However, in this video I'm going to share my point of view, some historic basis of what and how it is actually happening here in this region and so forth. A lot of information can be considered to take account to, especially when it comes to rare plants such as this. Is one of the reasons why a lot of research and need to be done carefully, because these plants initially were sold for a very expensive price. Now, coming back to this particular plant known as Monstera Borsigiana, what I want to mention to you here, and based on my opinion again, that these are actually tissue cultured plants. Why am I saying it? Is because initially when Monstera Deliciosa were actually introduced here as a rare plant category, you must understand that these plants were sold as a matured plant, and in case they were sold even as a cutting, you will always see a fully grown plant with many holes in it. Now there will be a secondary hole, the primary hole, and a secondary hole along the main leaf stem, and these are the things that is been sold. And when they are sold, they were at least accounted for one leaf for Rm 300 ringgit, and they were highly sought after and very expensive, and it always hit the market as that is the prime plant to own. Then after some time, was during about 2 years time in that kind of selection. Then after that, a lot of this particular juvenile version of Monstera was introduced, and it was slightly expensive, though it was slightly cheaper than the Monstera Deliciosa, and a lot of people were actually purchasing it. Now the historic factor about it is that if you can go through the trail of what was actually happening in the plant market, was a lot of this was actually imported, and they were all appeared to be very much uniform. And what I understand here is that when something is so well and uniform, is like every single plant is appeared to be like 3 leaf and 4 leaf exact leaf pattern, and there were but 2 plants growing together in one singular pot. And I was actually noticing that this particular trend, and a lot of it was actually coming from China, and the idea of tissue culture was fairly very new during that time. So eventually, as time goes by, a lot of this was slowly flooding the market, was something that was appearing to be initially for the first 6 months, it was actually priced was equivalent to a Monstera Deliciosa. That means to say that a singular leaf cutting of a Monstera Deliciosa matured leaf was sold for Rm 300. A baby Monstera Borsigiana was actually sold for 300. And that was quite a spike, because I think whoever the vendor was, they would have bought it for a very cheap price in a bulk. Then as time goes by, a lot of these imports were coming in, and the price were actually dropping consistently. So can you imagine, for those people who actually purchased this Monstera Borsigiana, or maybe we can call it Monstera B, whoever bought the Monstera B, they would have got it for 300 ringgit, and down the road within 6 months the price crashed. It crashed until it became RM 25 ringgit, from 300 to 25. And that was such a blow within 6 months time, because whether you believe it or not, within the 6 months time, in that period, the plant is such a slow growing plant. You don't really going to see any vegetation that, or any appearance on it. It is just going to be appearing like a big giant photos. And this is one of the frustration that took place in the plant market, because when price crash, it actually devastated the plant market, because all those people who bought were thinking on an investment value where they want to resell back the plant and get back for some thing of a value, so that the price may not be so expensive. And when Monstera B was introduced, a lot of other plants too came in with that batch, and most of those are actually from the rare plant category. So when it comes to tissue culture plants, this is one of the menace, or you can say a sort of like a curse when it comes to tissue culture. They are actually been produced in bulk. It means you can easily say about 10,000, 100,000, and when they come, they really flood the market, and the prices just crash like crazy. You may not able to see it, because it'll be a very slow, steady price drop. But however, when it happens, it's that the initial people who actually purchased it as during the market trend will actually feel the pinch, because when they would have bought it, it is spanning at least about 5 figures to 6 figures plant price. Hence now it is practically worthless. So the idea here is that I've noticed that when this trend is very much happening in every single cycle, I realized that it is just going to be, there is no holy grail of a plant that will have a kind of fixed steady price. That means if you were to buy something of a plant that is going to cost you 1,000, it's not going to stay there. Especially another particular plant known as Colocasia ferrumas. It was also a trending plant, which of that price, when it was actually came in, it was spending to 10k, and eventually it dropped to steadily from 10 to 5, 5 to 3, 3 to 1k, then 900, 800, 700. It just went down the drain until now it's sort of like RM 30 ringgit for a full grown plant. So these are the things that I notice when it comes to trending plants. Now I'm sorry about the initial introduction is quite long on this, because I just want to make mention of it, is that a lot of people are actually focused on buying rare plants, thinking that they would have had sort of like a status thing, or more on the element of investment, thinking that it is something rare and unique and expensive. I'm so sorry to tell you that it's not going to last very long. Right now, what have actually trending now are both Monstera Deliciosa and Borsigiana. Is actually for it. The trend now is going into the category of variegated plants. So the thing about variegation here is it's a very sensitive thing. Yeah, some particular ones that is created in the lab that are actually stable, but in most cases, when it comes to different types of photos or even philodendron, their variegation is so unstable. And I've just recently witnessed a well-grown philodendron Brazil have ditched all the yellow, and now it is just plain dark green, and now it's just hardly philodendron. So when it comes to plants such as this, do take note that when it comes to variegation, they are not stable plants. So that are my introduction based on these two particular types of Monstera. I want to mention to you based on my experience here is that when I was actually watching and looking through and figuring it out, especially plant soul in these nurseries here, do take note that it is practically impossible to know between two species, especially the Monstera B and Monstera Deliciosa, where when they are juvenile or grown from seed, or if it's tissue culture, you can never know the difference until they have grown to a matured size. And when I say matured plant, you have to take an account at least about 2 to 3 years time, and you can really see have really grown big, and then you can actually make a difference. And the difference is very visible, because when it comes to Monstera Borsigiana, it is not going to be a very huge leaf plant like a Deliciosa. So this is one of the things you have to take note of. And in the context of sensitivity, I have actually killed 3 times of this Monstera Borsigiana. I actually bought it for about RM20 ringgit from Ninso. They were actually selling 2 to 3 plantlet, sort of like a juvenile plant, but 3 to 4 plants in one pot, and in one plant actually has about 4 leaves, 3 to 4 leaves. So it's quite a big steal. I was looking at, wow, it's amazing. And 1 or 2 leaves are already showing some signs of vegetation, where there's sort of like a holes appearing to be on it. So it was such a big deal. That's why I realized that eventually a lot of these plants were already flooding the market. And the other thing that I noticed about when it comes to tissue culture, they seems to be very super finicky. A little bit of this, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of overwater, and the whole thing rots. So I actually killed twice, and I realized that they are not as hardy as photos of philodendron. So this is one of the things that I've noticed, that when it comes to tissue culture plants, they can be far more finicky, in a way to say that they cannot handle shock. So if there is a shock available, in a sense that sudden change of atmosphere, or sudden change of climate for them, where if they were kept indoors in a very cool aircon kind of a room, or on a store base, the lighting is just very bright but indirect light kind of thing, and then if you expose it to outdoor light setting, they won't really do so well. Or even in a darker space, because of the thing that I also noticed, that once I came back after about 3 months time back to the store, I see a lot of stem rot, the plant just falling apart, the leaves are turning yellow. So even in the store, they were not even doing properly. And even the potting medium they were actually using is just pure coconut peat, and so it didn't really go through it. And all the root ball, when it comes to the aerial roots, I see the tip of the aerial root is all burnt. So these are the things that a lot of people don't take notice of, and when I find that these are the things that I see, I take note that these are the plants are not really doing so well. Now coming back to this particular video, we can see there's a lot of yellow dots on the leaves. This is actually more on a fungus attack, and I know what is actually the culprit is actually this chicken manure that they accidentally used, and it's actually causing this fungus attack on the leaves. And these are the things that you have to take notice of, because one of this kind of damage cannot be reversed. And you can see that these leaves are there for so many years, and this damage, I think the price will drop. And in most cases the vendors will not bring down the price, because they will be adamant to say that they want to cover the losses, and eventually the whole plant will just wither and die away. So these are the things that I've noticed that you may have to take an account of before purchasing the plant. So of course the plant looks good and all that, but I think one small mistake as such as this is going to ruin the whole thing. Now I noticed that the potting medium is actually like a regular potting mix, regular potting soil. You can see even the roots actually drying and falling apart. So and you can see some burn marks on the stem. All these are no telltale sign that it's going to go. So this is one big mistake they have done, and I think most cases that a lot of people do not do proper research, especially the vendors, the nursery owners. They will just ask the workers to just put in some fertilizer, and they just ignore it, and it is the things that they miss out to, and before you know it, within 2 to 3 months time, the yellow dots will become big and white, and eventually one leaf will come 3 5 leaf, and there will be a stem rot, and the whole thing is gone. Please do take note that these are tissue culture plants. As I said, they are very sensitive. So a lot of amateur gardeners, they will be excited and they see and they just buy without investigating all this kind of sign, and what will take place, that sometimes the plant can weather the storm. It will just survive, and then you have this kind of dots, and they'll think it's okay. And there are cases where people think that these yellow dots are actually variegation. So it's not, it's more of a fungus attack, or the kind of leaf rot kind of stuff, because of the chicken manure, or what do you call this, goat dung kind of thing. It is not actually suitable for this Monstera plant. So these are the things that you have to take note of before purchasing the plant. So just mention to you that these are the things that you have to watch out for, look out for, because I believe this is not cheap, because it's quite not just a new plant. It's sort of like more of a teenage plant, just would have easily about 3 years plant, I can say, roughly. So in that kind of thing. And knowing Monstera, these ones, I noticed that they actually stick it up on a stick, and so they didn't really give a proper totem pole like the one that you use for like a coconut husk kind of thing. That will really actually do very well, and can actually see the primary or secondary holes appearing on the leaves. So this do not really have that. So most likely this is Borsigiana. And the other problem here is that most of it is actually appearing to be crawling on a pot. And these new batches, we can notice, is actually in a plastic poly bags, and they're actually using clay soil for growing this Monstera. So in a way it's a bit scary, because these are not the ideal potting medium for them, because a root rot can easily take place, because if it's overwatering and if it's underwatering, the clay soil sort of will harden and choke the plant. I really do not know what exactly it's been thought of when it comes to this kind of plants, but one thing I can say that these are actually grown in such a huge bulk, and so therefore I think to cut costs when it comes to nursery owners or farmers, I think this is one of the things that they find that maybe it is conducive in that particular kind of a place where the farm is. Perhaps it has grown in a very high cold temperate region, and so the plant can handle as there is a very high humidity in highlands. When it comes to lowland, I think these plants may not last very long. I may be wrong, but based on my experience, and I know that knowing Monstera plants are very sensitive, may not do well when it comes to soil clay soil such as this. Now another thing that I would like to make an emphasis here, you'll be seeing a lot of these leaves petiole that I'll be holding through, and I'll be playing with this particular fan shape kind of thing at the edge of the stem where the leaf is. I think this particular part of the plant is known as geniculum, and I find that this is supposed to be one of the features where when it comes to Monstera leaf, it's supposed to have this fan shaped kind of feature where at the neck of the stem where the leaf meets, it's sort of like a kind of a adjusting feature for the leaf to handle when it comes to strong wind and kind of stuff like that. And that is sort of like a beautiful thing if you were to see that it has sort of like winged kind of feature, a little bit more thin veined factor and all that. And these are the factors when it comes to Monstera that it was mentioned that Monstera Deliciosa are the one that actually owns it, and then Borsigiana doesn't have it. But when I look at it, as time goes by, both seems to appear to have it. So all the small details sort of like can be confusing. So for visual display, I'm just showing it to you so that you can be intrigued by it, to know that it is just so impossible to identify which is which. Coming back to this video, you can actually see the biggest Monstera plant that I actually come across. I believe this is Monstera Deliciosa, and you can see the stem. It's quite a small plant actually, about 4 or 5 leaves on a particular plant. However, the leaves are quite huge and quite span, and you can see that the secondary and primary holes on it. So this is how I identify it as Deliciosa. I can be wrong, maybe it's a bigger version of Borsigiana. But again, I also seen that some of the pictures when it comes to Borsigiana, the leaf don't really grow so big. So this is my suspicion, and I can see that some of it appears to be more like crawling rather than climbing. So in a way, these are the things that I can say that a lot of this plant are not really taken care of. For a plant such as this is considered rare and expensive, the leaves actually suffered a lot of extensive damage on it. So it is sort of like sad to see. But however, I can see the pot is quite big, and they did use a proper potting medium on it. I see a lot of perlite and aroid mix used for this particular type of Monstera. I would like to share my tip here. One tip before I end the video is that I would really recommend that anyone who wants to grow a Monstera should always grow the plant when it's a small particular plant, and purchase it in that kind of size and let it grow big and acclimatize to your garden conditions. So the problem here is that in most cases, people who get very excited and buy a very huge plant only to find that the plant is very big and established and unable to acclimatize in the garden condition, and due to stress factor, in most cases they will not fare well, and there will be a lot of burns and leaf drop and even root rot or stem rot. So the best thing to do is to always get a juvenile plant or a baby plant and let it take, it's okay to take care of it for a 1 to 2 years time, and eventually it will find its way, and the leaves will eventually turn according to the lighting that it receives and the amount of watering it gets, and it will be stabilized by then. And failure to do so, if you were to get a very huge plant, the whole thing can die, and you would have wasted the whole your finance on it, and you can also get heartsick about it, and you would break your spirit of gardening. So similarly, like that, when it comes to Monstera variegated plants, it will be ideal to get a decent small size plant such as this, and let them grow to their maximum size in your garden in the span of 2 to 3 years time, and it will actually beautifully stabilize itself. So I would like to end my video here. As you can see, a beautiful collection of all the Monstera variegated plants here, which is now considered trending plant, and it's still in its prime premium prices, which is sold easily, you can see, in 3-figure prices, and it's closing to 1k ringgit Malaysia, which I find that it is considered an expensive plant, because looking at the number of the leaf, if the plant dies, there goes your money. Hence, I would like to end my video here. If you have any questions, do put them in a comment below, and I'll try my best to answer based on my experience and my opinion. And I would really appreciate if you can click like, subscribe, and support my channel, which I would really like to hear from you in your comments. Take care and have a nice day. Bye.
you.